Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. My name is Christina Schaefer. I'm the Director of Social Media for HAR. Welcome to today's panel. We're excited about today's panel. About a year ago, we sat down and started this conversation about racism in real estate and what can be done. And since then, a lot has changed. And a lot of time's passed, a whole year. So we're going to get right into it. Now, if you missed last year's panel, you're in for a treat because we have some wonderful diversity leaders with us today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves here in a moment. As we're going through, if you have any questions or you want to join the conversation in any way, feel free to type those questions and comments into the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can today. But with that, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here on this panel. And so, yeah, thank you. So let's go ahead and start with some introductions. And we can start with you, Grant, because I see you right there next to me. Grant Harpold.
Thank you, Christina. What a pleasure to be here and be back again a year later. I'm Grant Harpold, Legal Counsel for HAR. Excited to be here today.
Thank you. Mike?
Good morning, and thank you for having me here today. I'm Mike Wong with KW Commercial. I currently serve as the 2021 chairman of the Asian American Real Estate Association in Houston. I'm also a HAR commercial director and serve on the HAR Diversity and Inclusion Task Force.
Very good. LaDonna?
Good morning, Houston, and thank you for having us back again. LaDonna Parker, I'm a broker associate with the Keller Williams Sugarland office and the immediate past president of the Houston Black Real Estate Association. I currently serve as a board of director for the Texas Association of Realtors, as well as the National Association of Real Estate Brokers and the Houston Community Land Trust. I do want to, in the past, I served as a risk management advisory board person, and I currently serve on the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. And I want to give a special shout out to Bob Hale, Thomas Mouton, Renee Galvan, and our diversity leader, Tracy Brown, a consultant whose visionary leadership is getting us through this special period. So thanks again for having me.
Absolutely, and thank you for mentioning those leaders, because they're definitely, we can talk about that a little more later, but they are definitely leading us in the right direction. And Danny, last but not least.
Yeah, my name is Danny Garcia. I am the past president for NAHREP Houston, which is the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. I also sit on the advisory board for HAR Technology, and also on the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. And again, thank you for having us.
Very good. So again, you all joined me almost a year ago to the day to start this conversation that really needed to be had. Since then, there's been many more conversations that have taken place and more people talking about real issues within the industry. I'd love to hear, last year I asked you all to share some personal experiences, but I'd love for you again to share some personal experiences, whether good or bad, from the last year, just to have an idea of what has taken place in that time. And we can take the same order for this one if we want to start with you, Grant.
Okay, thank you again. It's been a positive, I think, since we last got together a year ago, and I will say that from a personal experience, if I can characterize it that way. And I'll say it in this sense, that I did not know a whole lot, if anything, about the Tulsa massacres. And here we are 100 years later talking about it, finally, at a more open and broad scale. And I think it's important to know history like that, and because that sort of experience, that sort of history, I think having that knowledge leads to more sensitivity to what other people may have gone through or are living through or have knowledge of. And so if you ignore history, then you're doomed to repeat it. And so I think it's always good to look back and be reflective and study things that have happened in the past, incorporate that knowledge into how you go about handling yourself and how you treat others. And in the sense of the Tulsa massacre, there's a lot to be gained, a lot to be applied, and a lot to be used in our daily lives going forward. So I think in that sense, there's been at least on a personal basis, and I think probably others have shared that too, that there's been, it's been positive. And so I'm appreciative for that bit of history.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Grant. Mike?
It's been a year, right? And the one great thing I'll say about it is we're more aware. We're having these conversations that are ongoing, and it's beyond this panel. It's with agents and brokers and consumers that we interact with every day. So it's great that we're having this interaction. But the experiences out there show that we still have a long way to go. And I think these interactions and these difficult conversations have made us more alert and kind of aware of what's going on around us, to where I even notice friends are more careful about talking around me, right? Like one of my friends texted me the other night. He said, "Hey, where's a great sushi restaurant?" And he texted me back 5 minutes later. He goes, "I'm sorry, I know how that man came out." And I said, "What do you mean? I love tacos. What are you asking about sushi for?" But I got it. And people are more aware. They're almost afraid, but the really offensive things have kind of slowed down. They kind of stopped, and even though they still go on, they're still out there. People are now watching themselves, so we're starting to our behavior is changing a little bit, and we're starting to get better. But we have a lot of progress to make.
Yeah, definitely. LaDonna?
So what's positive, I agree with Grant, is the fact that we are having more conversations and getting more exposure. For example, a piece of history that's over 100 years old. And we're finally having that conversation and being open to receiving that information. However, when you think about Tulsa and the amount of wealth that was wiped out, I think it's like 3 to 4 billion in today's dollars. And you think about appraisals. That's my big, that's my hot button for today, appraisals and the wealth gap, because recently we have seen more and more incidents where this wealth gap through devaluation of Black communities comes up. In fact, in preparation, I Googled discrimination and appraisals, and oh my Lord, there are just pages of incidents where it's just being exposed. So that is a good thing, and I'm sure many people have seen that recent Carlette Duffy piece. I think it was on NBC. It's all over the internet. But her first appraisal was 125. The second appraisal was 110. And then when she had the husband, the white husband, stand in at her home and remove all of her Black art and such, the appraisal came in at $256,000. And I think today we want to have a little more conversation about that, and what kind of policies we can influence to change that.
Absolutely. Again, last but not least, Danny, I promise I'll let you go first next time.
No, don't worry. Actually, we're good. But no, I mean, the improvements I've seen is I'll start at my household, because I always say we start at home, with educating our kids. Has been more conversation about what's been going on. And, my kids are finally understanding, that there is some racial gaps. But like, Michael said, there's been a lot of improvements. However, there's still a lot of progress to be made. Same thing like Michael was saying, I think most of us have become a little bit more aware when we talk, when we address certain things about, being more sensitive to other people. Through NAHREP, we're still advocating, for the Latino community, and, also, being able to obtain loans, getting in partnership with banks and so forth. But, we kind of seen the door open where it's like, okay, let's see where the differences are, what separates us to make us all equal and, have the same opportunities, because we're no longer living in back times. We have a lot of entrepreneurs who are Latinos, Asians, Blacks, everything, so we're not living in the time frames we were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. Those conversations start at home. A little bit later in the program, I'm going to recommend a book to people that that is making me think about how we're raising our daughter and our niece and nephews. So we can talk about that a little bit later, but it definitely starts at home. And thank you for sharing those stories, because again, I think it shows that there is some positive change happening as far as conversations opening up, people paying attention to what they're saying, like Mike referenced, but of course, as LaDonna said, there's still change that needs to take place. So thank you all for sharing those stories. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the movements we've seen over the last year. Obviously, the murder of George Floyd was a wake-up call for the world, which gave more awareness to the Black Lives Matter movement. Towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we saw more attention to the Stop AAPI hate movement. Do you believe, and even now it's Pride Month, right? So do you believe that movements like these, or, do you think they help bring real attention to the issues, or do you think this is maybe just lip service or something that people just post on social media? And we can start with you on this one, Danny.
Well, I think it's always about the message. You bring attention to everything, but the question is, what is the objective? And I think we've seen both sides of it, where it's to address, more division, and some questions is like, okay, great. It's like, John Maxwell says, you have processes and events. A lot of times we have more events than what we even have a process. So the question is this, once you have all these events going on, is what is the next step? And I think that's where we have the issue with certain things that happen, and lately we have seen more events occurring, or more legislation, or more changes, or more awareness. But, I think the thing is this, even though we pay attention to these matters, the question is always, what's next? And that's where a lot of people just kind of, like with my kids, when we see stuff, okay, let's have a conversation. What did you just see? What did you just hear? How can we be of a benefit? How can we help? And this is in all areas of our lives, and I think that's kind of like where, more of the narrative that I'm seeing and I want to continue seeing also is these events do bring light, but the question is always going to be, what do we do next,
Mm-hmm. LaDonna?
Well, historically in the Black community, movements bring real change. And in this instance with George Floyd, his life and death has certainly not been in vain, because not only did it create a global conversation, we saw global leaders rise and say, you know what, this is just not right. We have to do something. And one example is what we are doing through HAR, and I am proud to be an associate with the Houston Association of Realtors, because HAR instantly said, hate has no place here. We took this anti-racism stance. Another industry leader, I'm proud to say, is Gary Keller with Keller Williams. He said, no, this is not right, and decided that he would take epic action. So now we have a global task force of diversity and equity. It's not just inclusion, we are focused on equity. So every market center is participating at a high level to make sure that we are being accountable to this movement and really making a difference. And we've also seen local accountability. It's not an easy thing, but it's doable, and it's being done in the Keller Williams family for sure.
Wonderful. Mike?
Just hearing what LaDonna said, the tragedy of George Floyd and how it set the world on fire. I think about how that happened, and we probably had the largest collaborative effort, most conversations in the history of mankind right now, because of technology and social media, and that's an amazing tool. But I still feel like, looking at stats, looking at how we're behaving, we haven't caught up. Technology is rapidly advancing. We're more aware of social issues. We're more aware of that change that needs to come, but we're not implementing, we're not reacting, we're not behaving as quickly. So that's something that bothers me, but I think we're getting there. I think as we have these conversations, as our industry changes and adapts and begins to bring in leaders, begins to bring in policies and enforce fair housing and ethics, I think we're going to start getting there, but we still have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Grant?
Yeah, it's so easy to from a corporate standpoint to write a check and that can be a good thing, or from an individual standpoint to say something on social media, and that can be a good thing, and that can start the conversation, or that can help amplify where help is needed. But I think it still gets back to you and local things. I mean, conducting yourself with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers, in sort of a local sense to make a change, and it still gets back to being a people issue and a personal issue, and dealing with it on a local level. Yes, social media and posting something and say, hey, look what I just posted. You can admire it and feel good about it, and see it go out to the world, and write a big check and see that go out to the world, and that can be good, and that's all good, but it still comes back to what are you doing in your own box, or what are you doing to get outside of your box and affect those around you?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So Mike, LaDonna, and Danny, you are all leaders with diversity groups in Houston, as we mentioned earlier. What initiatives have the diversity groups that you're involved with been working on? And on this one, we'll start with LaDonna.
Okay, well, we are clear that policy matters. And over the years, first and foremost, we are proponents for democracy in housing. So we've continued working to increase the Black homeownership rate. The gap is still wide. So you've got the white homeownership rate at 73.8%, according to the most recent census data, and the Black homeownership up 1 point from a year ago to 45.1%. That is still lower than what it was when the Fair Housing Act was implemented. So we're continuing with our fight to increase Black homeownership, and right now with the pandemic layering, we are focused as well on homeownership retention, because we know on the other side of the pandemic, as I mentioned last year, we're going to see a disproportionate number of Black families and people of color losing their homes. So we are moving towards policy and working with the current administration to make sure that funding is properly dispersed and action is taken to make a difference. We're also supporting on a policy basis on a national HR Bill 2553, that's the Real Estate Valuation Fairness and Improvement Act of 2021. We are clear that very little happens, as Danny and Mike have stated, without policy. So we are pushing policy and also providing local scholarships for people interested in pursuing the appraisal field. And last but not least, we are dispatching our ambassadors throughout the Houston area to provide updated information on our initiatives to educate, empower, and invite people to join us towards our mission of democracy in housing.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, we have partnered with the NAACP on its home ownership education initiatives as well, and their efforts as well. So yes, thank you very much for sharing that. I was actually going to turn it to Mike next, and there's a question right here that I bet you can answer for us. Lisa was saying, what about Asian, Pacific Islander, and Native American home ownership? So I know you had looked up some statistics about Asian home ownership. Mike, you want to share some of that with us?
Yes. So my association, we're just getting back from the pandemic and really reorganizing as a group, and we're looking at the landscape of issues to address. The immediate thing that came to mind was AAPI hate. But as an association, we're looking at hosting forums for our members, understanding what they're experiencing, understanding what our consumers are experiencing, and how to address that. How do we find out the deficiencies in the industries that Asian American, Pacific Islanders, and Native Americans are facing? We believe those conversations, those incidents have happened to many of our members, and even some of our board members and leaders. And so when we can express that to each other, and we see kind of these issues that we can bring out to the community or we can bring out to other associations. We think those conversations will bring about the change that we need. As far as statistics, I really didn't look up too much on the Asian home ownership issue.
I got you, Mike.
Okay.
I got you. So we've got 59.6% for the Asian, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders, and 49.3% for the Hispanic.
Thank you, LaDonna.
I'm sorry I didn't share that initially.
No, that's great information. I think on our side,
we're a team.
Absolutely. On our side in the Asian community, we're more worried about communication. We're more worried about predatory lending, and just making sure that our consumers and our clients understand and they have equal opportunities and a fair playing field. As far as what we're experiencing in, as far as hate towards Asians, and I don't know if you want to go into this now, Christina, but that's personally been bothering me. It's been the conversation with my board and conversations I'm having with the other associations in the industry, and those statistics I do know, and they're disappointing. But believe it or not, 55% of Asian American women have personally experienced racist encounters against them. 6 Asian women were just shot in Atlanta this year. Statistics show 24% of Asian Americans, that's 1 in 4 Asian Americans, are likely to be spit on or coughed on since the pandemic. One thing I just experienced last week that was infuriating is 41% of Asian Americans experience people intentionally mispronouncing their name and encouraging them to Americanize. So this actually happened in person with a client last week, and it took everything I had to maintain composure and behave. Asian hate crimes up 164% this year. So, there's different conversations that we're having internally as far as industry and our professionals and our Asian American allies.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mike. And Danny.
Yeah, no, through NAHREP, the biggest thing we do is we're sort of constantly advocating, and we do have, like Donna said, policy. Policy is the biggest thing. How do we change is, hitting it right at the root. And, so we usually have a policy conference, kind of like what Mike said, coming back from the pandemic, we're regrouping, but our policy conference, we take the time to go and advocate, and we go lobby in Washington, D.C. for different policies that affect the Latino community and also the equal lending opportunities that they have. Not being involved with NAHREP and everything, I wasn't aware of the numbers and the discrepancies that were there, because we do have Latinos that are getting approved and they're buying. The numbers show that by 2024, 70% of your buyers were going to be Latinos in the United States. So we do have a large number, but there's still a lot of obstacles that are being addressed, with it. So our goal is to get out there and address them. We sit down, meet with boards, or for example, Bank of America, Chase, the big banks, and address, what the concerns are. One thing that we've always narrowed down is just educating our Latinos, basically, understanding how to work with banks. Not that they need education, it's just learning to trust the banks because of what's happened in the past. The lack of trust that has been there is regaining it back. And once you gain it, then you open up, more opportunity for Latinos to understand the way the system works and the way the banks lend. Most Latino owners that I have, they'd rather just buy cash, buy something small and say, I own it, than saying, the bank has my loan. So the biggest thing with us is, continuing to educate, and those are the initiatives we're taking. And then also educating the real estate agents. Some of them say, why is it different? Even me as a second generation, American, I still struggle with, Latinos that are just coming, first generation here because it's a different mindset. So we try to bring all that together and, educate the practitioners through NAHREP on how to work and how to just make it a better experience for the Latino community.
Thank you so much. I'm going to throw in an additional question to you here. We're getting a lot of people thanking us in the comments for having this conversation, but we know there are people that don't want these conversations to be had, or they think that maybe having these conversations is hindering progress. What would you say to someone that maybe has that stance? And anybody can really jump in here if you want to answer that.
I'll kind of relate with that. I mean, I thought, having 4 kids, and they're all under 12. Honestly, I'll be very transparent with you. I thought maybe by avoiding the questions, my kids would see themselves as who they are and not something different. When George Floyd happened, that opened up the conversation, where my kids were like, wait, hold on, what's going on? I saw my friends, as equals. I didn't realize, my friends were Black, Asian, or whatever. So, it's been a little bit on those sides where just the progress we've been making with them, and having these conversations, you start realizing, okay, you don't want to have the conversation because you open up these wounds instead of progressing forward. But going back, part of being not repeating history is understanding history, as Grant said, otherwise we doom ourselves. So now taking it from the educational approach and my kids understanding what's occurred in the past, what's gotten us to where we're at, and what's going to happen in the future, because there's always going to be disruption, whether it's, through racism, through technology, or whatever, so it's not a smooth sailing world. So my conversation has changed with my kids now, realizing there's many obstacles in life, and one of them being the color of your skin. And, I think if the conversation stays positive, we can heal the wound and still have these conversations. The problem is the people who just want to deny it or just beat around the bush and act like it doesn't exist or have these positive conversations with people. I like to stand with people who are more open-minded, but when you get somebody who's just saying their way of saying, this is the way it is, that makes it very difficult, and that's where you get a lot of traction from both sides.
Yeah. Anyone else have a comment there?
Oh, I do. Go ahead, Grant.
Well, I was just picking up on what Danny said.
Yeah,
I don't know anybody that's perfect. And so,
that's right.
And sometimes we're resistant to look within ourselves and to challenge ourselves and to add something else to our list of things to do within our own lives. And so I understand sometimes the resistance to tackle these kind of issues, but I think you have to, and you need to. And it's, at the end of the day, it makes you a better person, and here's the newsflash: it will make those around you a better person. And that's what we're doing here, and that's where we're going with all this, and I think it works.
Yeah.
Just got to keep at it.
Very good. I can say for me personally, my niece and two nephews are Black. My daughter is mixed race, half Latina, half white, with a whole bunch of ethnicities mixed in there, and they're all under 5. And we've had these conversations with them, and my sister-in-law and brother-in-law talk to their children about that they are Black. Our kids are raised together, and I will tell you that even having these conversations and just acknowledging our differences, my daughter and niece still think they're twins. So, having these conversations, I think, especially like Danny said with children, although it might be scary that you might be teaching them differences, you're really just teaching them how beautiful those differences can be, I think, in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and transparency is important. Our history is what it is. Each of us, we're all America. We all represent America, and our children deserve to know what really happened in history. I was dumbfounded watching the Tulsa riot, Tulsa massacre now, because it was actually a massacre, and to know that there are 3 mass grave sites, 3 that are being excavated as we speak. Our children deserve to know the truth, and that's what America has to stand for. And likewise, in our industry, we need to know the truth and receive it. And I'm happy that HAR, through our diversity and inclusion efforts, will be provided information that people can optionally receive. We're not forcing you, we're just making it available.
Okay. And did you have any comments there, Mike? I didn't want to leave you out.
Yes, absolutely. Just thinking about that question about do we need to be having these conversations? And I see it both ways. One thing is we're in Houston, we're in Fort Bend County, so we're in the most diverse county in the United States, right? We're in a great city. We have a lot of diversities. We have different parts of town where you can go for different foods and different cultures. We have all these celebrations and festivals. But at the same time, we're having these conversations because America is wounded, and you treat a wound by either treating it, putting on medication and healing, or you ignore it and it becomes an infection and it gets worse. And I think right now America is right on the verge of either healing or going to an infection. And that's why these conversations are important to have, because we are trying to heal, we are trying to get better, we are trying to help each other, and that's why we're here.
Absolutely. I'm hoping for healing over here. Grant, let's take it to a different angle here. From a legal perspective, what changes have taken place over the last year within our industry that our members should be aware of?
Well, picking up on what Mike just said about a wound and healing a wound, and just kind of tying into your question, the Civil War was in 1865, which obviously was a huge wound. In the midst of the Civil War in 1866, we took on a political battle too, not just a physical wartime on the field battle, but a political battle with the banning of racial discrimination and the sale or leasing of housing. That was in 1866. So we're still dealing with that battle today, and that's good and that's bad. But what we've done here, and I'm proud of what NAR did, is back in November, they basically said, no, there was an ethical issue if you had hate speech or discriminatory speech in relation to your real estate services, and they expanded that to just non-real estate. Any time you interact with somebody or publicly and say something that's discriminatory or hateful, and you could be subject to an ethics complaint. And that ethics complaint could come through Texas Realtors or through HUD or through TREC. Mm-hmm. And it can be filed by a consumer or another licensee. And so we have the institution in place, we have the rules in place. That rule, even though I'm glad we have that rule, but you should be acting that way without being told that. But it's good to have it there anyway. You're told not to rob a bank also. We know not to rob a bank. So rules are good, but it still gets back to just fundamentally positioning yourself and being aware of these issues and being sensitive to them. And again, knowing the history of it, which will allow you to develop that sensitivity to what others may be thinking or experiencing.
Very good. Thank you, Grant. So as you all mentioned, you're members of the HAR Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. Can you share with us some initiatives that the group is working on and how HAR is attempting to help us move forward? And on this one, we'll start with you, Mike.
Well, I'll start with our HAR chairman, Richard Miranda. I know he's been personally teaching the At Home with Diversity class, and I had the opportunity to listen in on that. I was in and out, so I didn't want to take MC credit, but I did get to listen in, and I was really encouraged and impressed listening to the conversations of the members from the class. And as I hear those conversations, I couldn't help but think these are our future leaders in our industry coming up. And seeing how available that class is, and seeing what HAR is doing to bring training or encourage mandatory training with TREC, those types of classes do help because they create those micro conversations, right, that we're not having here on Member Focus Monday in front of thousands of HAR members, but they create personal, direct conversation between our actual members and people that are just starting in the industry. Mm-hmm. I personally admire everybody on the task force. They're great friends. They're people I look up to. I appreciate Bob Hale for giving us this forum. LaDonna and Danny, LaDonna's still in my office. Danny came from my office, so they're good personal friends and like family to me. So hopefully, I'm hoping one day our associations and our groups can collaborate under HAR to kind of unify our members and present our mission to the public.
Yeah, very good. LaDonna?
I think for me, and I've kind of touched on this already, mostly that the leadership took the anti-racism position. That really makes a difference. It's not just, we're not racist. No, we are not going to tolerate it. We are going to be proactive in making programs available so that our members can take advantage of these things. And I know Mike mentioned some of the mandatory classes, but I am most proud of our willingness to just make stuff available because everybody's not ready. We have to meet people where they are. And we have to be considerate that a lot of people, like many of us, didn't know anything about Tulsa and the losses. And, by getting people access to information that they can then internalize, it can be traumatic for other people as well, the white people who may be coming to terms with some of this and some of the falsehoods that they have understood over time. We know, and I'm just happy that our association is moving in the right direction on making information available. And I will give a shout out to Rita as well, she's embracing affordable housing and the community land trust and models for people that people of color are more likely to take advantage of.
Yes, thank you. Rita, I believe, is watching this morning, and she's our Director of Professional Development. We've had a lot of offerings for different educational opportunities. I'm sure we can share some links in the comments for that as well. Danny?
Same thing, a lot of stuff that Donna and Michael have shared. I think the biggest thing for me has been the awareness, hearing all sides of it. Sometimes we get caught in our own bubble, in our own communities, and we think, we're the ones dealing with things, and being able to share with Michael, what the Asian community is dealing with, and has kind of just brought me to a different perspective. That's not just, certain races. I mean, I'm even speaking to some of, some agents that are white. They're saying, dude, we've been seeing on our side, and as we progress, knowing that, like Houston's mostly Latino, and now we're becoming the majority, is like, where we're going to next, even educating the Latinos, and then having these conversations within the group that we have is been eye-opening, and the education that's being provided, on being able to see across the spectrum, not just on your side, and being able to see what everybody's dealing with. So it's an exciting group, the educating part of it, bringing it back, and implementing some of these things to education has been a lot of value for me as well.
Absolutely. Grant, I know you're not technically a part of the Diversity Inclusion Task Force, but did you have anything you wanted to add here as far as HAR's initiatives over the last year?
How did you read my mind so well? Yes, I do.
I just know you that well, Grant.
HAR has been great because of the emphasis on these issues. It's allowed me to think about them and also bring out and discuss those. When I now speak, I always include a fair housing issue or a fair housing update, fair housing issues or discrimination issues. I'm making a special effort to include that in what I'm saying and talking to members or the public in my speaking issues on legal and related issues. And I'm thankful that HAR has brought this to the attention of everyone, including myself, and allowed me to speak on these issues to others in our goal to move forward.
Very good. And I can just say, as an HAR staff person, I know that you're all aware, but HAR staff, we were all put through a mandatory training over the last, I believe it was 4 months. And that was very eye-opening, and this was, outside of business hours. All of our staff got on a Zoom call, and we were led by HAR's diversity and inclusion consultant, Tracy Brown, and it was excellent. And we were not just encouraged, but almost required to share our personal experiences and things that we've seen, in our personal lives, but also just as staff in dealing with so many different members of different backgrounds and experiences. And I can say for me personally, it did make a huge difference. And one of the biggest things that I think I learned is to listen, not wait for your turn to talk, just listen to what other people have to say and try to understand their background and where they might be coming from. That kind of leads us into my next question for you guys, which is, people wonder, how they can help moving forward. Some people say, well, let me, as Grant said, let me write a check, let me donate some money to movements or time to movements if you can volunteer time about movements that you're passionate about. But I think it's really important to listen and learn as much as possible. Anytime somebody recommends a book to me, I can't help but buy it and start reading it. So I have a recommendation for anybody that's interested this morning. But do you guys have any books or resources that you've utilized or read that you think have been helpful and you would like to suggest? And on this one, well, yeah, go ahead, LaDonna.
Know Your Price. Andre Perry, he's out of the Brookings Institute. He provides invaluable data as well as a personal story. He focuses on policy, and it's a great read and very informative.
Very good. Danny?
You know, our NAHREP website, we have a lot of, we have the Hispanic Wealth Initiative. We have good data, good information on it. So we go to NAHREP, which is, I think you have it there on my name, which is NAHREP.org. You know, you can go in there and actually find a lot of good resources as well. You know, it gives you stats on the Latino community, the workforce, and the wealth diversity that we have. That's a good, you know, place to start if you, as an agent, want to start getting some helpful resources.
Very good. And I do see Dina just mentioned a book in the chat. I won't mention it yet in case somebody else is going to mention it, but please, those of you that are watching live this morning, or if you're watching the recording, add in some resources in the chat, books or different resources like Danny just mentioned with the NAHREP website. And we'll go ahead and pass it to you, Mike.
You know, kind of just going back to what everybody said, you know, Grant talked about, hey, it's easy to write a check, but we really need those grassroots efforts. It starts with us. It starts at home, like Danny said. You know, it starts in associations like HAR where we're having these conversations. It's easy to write the check and forget about it, but we really need your efforts. We really need your work locally and personally. You know, we have the 3 diversity groups here represented. We have HR committees that will be having openings and things soon. As far as books, I read a ton of contracts, but I actually just got a book yesterday. This is a contract I'm reading through. This is 300 pages. I got to get through before this afternoon, but
So
when I have
read.
time, yeah. I got this. I was surprised to get this in the mail Saturday. This is from another diversity group leader who sent me this as a gift, and I saw it. And I said, you know, one day I'm going to sit and read that, and they know I wouldn't, so they bought the book, so I feel obligated. But it's called Enough About Me. It's by Richard Liu. He's an NBC reporter who does report on the racial tension and diversity issues we're having. So it'll be good to get that insight, and I promise I'll start reading that myself.
I'm going to be jotting that one down in a moment. Grant?
Well, 2 things, Christina, and you said one of them about listening. They once said Ben Franklin was the smartest man in America. And when he was told that, he said, if I am, it's because I listen. And I gain knowledge that way. And so I like your point on listening. And on books, I read Let the Trumpet Sound, which is a biography on Martin Luther King. It was written in the 80s. I probably read it 20-something years ago. And it's an incredible book as far as laying out the history of Dr. King and what he did to the country. And so I think my takeaway from reading that book and why I recommended it is that I put King in there with Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, King. I think he's iconic in our history. And I still don't think he's gotten the credit that he deserves, but again, we're still progressing as a nation.
Very good. So this book was actually just recommended to me about a week ago. It's called Whistling Vivaldi. Whistling Vivaldi, How Stereotypes Affect Us and What We Can Do. Actually, Shay Cotter, who is our Secretary-Treasurer of the HR Executive Committee, recommended that to me, and I ordered it and started reading it the very next day. And I'm about halfway through, but it's an excellent book about stereotypes and how they affect us, whether those be because of race, gender, age, sexual orientation, all kinds of different stereotypes and how they affect us. And because nobody mentioned it, I have to remind everyone about The Color of Law. If you have not read this book yet, please do. We recommended it to everybody last year, but The Color of Law, Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. Again, excellent read. We actually had Richard Rothstein on Member Focus Monday last year as well, so you can go back and watch that interview with him if you're interested. But again, that's another excellent read. And I'm seeing more coming into the comments, so please type those in if you have them. Several people mentioned the NAR Fairhaven. If you haven't done that yet, you can just Google NAR Fairhaven. It'll take you right to it. So I'd recommend that you guys look into that as well. Is there anything else? You guys have been wonderful and shared so much information today. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we sign off today? And I'll go in the order that we started, and we'll start with you, Grant.
Well, Christina, thank you for doing such a great job and getting us ready for this, and yes, having us on this panel. We're thankful for you and your knowledge and like I said, your point on listening, because you're great at doing that and then giving us the confidence to be here today. And so I think all the words that were said here today are important and useful, and for those that are listening or watching, there are takeaways, and every bit of pieces or big parts, however you want to use it, draw something out of this, look at yourself inwardly, and see how you can impact your community, your family, your friends, and improve yourself and be sensitive to those around you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Mike?
Well, again, same thing. Thank you, Christina, for organizing this, and thank you to HAR for just giving us this forum and recognizing the diversity in our association with these different chapters. Kind of like what Grant said, that it's a time for internal reflection to figure out, where our flaws are and where we can come out and be a positive contribution in our community. We all have different talents. We all have different skills that we can contribute, and I think we grow into those skills. We grow through challenges, and it's time for more people to step up and get involved. And there's plenty of opportunities at HAR in the communities with our groups here, HBREA, NAHREP, and AAREA.
Very good. LaDonna?
Yes, ma'am. I will take this time to personally thank my current board president, Marla Lewis, and current board chair, Kimberly Barnes Henson, for doing an amazing job leading HBREA forward out of the pandemic and onward with our mission of democracy and housing. They've got some phenomenal programs ahead, and we invite everyone to join us. And one last thing, I had an epiphany when we were talking about these books. Why don't we, Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, initiate a book club so we can start having these conversations, maybe in the platinum group, Christina? Give you a little more.
Yeah. I've had a few people suggest to me that maybe I need to start a book club, so we might be heading there, LaDonna.
Yes, that would be exciting, and it just gives people, and if we're doing it maybe through a social media platform as well, it gives some people an opportunity to just kind of sit back and listen, right, and learn a little more. But that's my my light bulb for today, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. Danny?
Likewise, Christina, thank you very much for having us here and having these topics, and really proud to be part of the organization. I really encourage agents that are out there, you haven't gotten plugged in. HAR has a lot of groups we can get involved with and serve to our practitioners, and I just want to thank you guys, and having these conversations, and I'm really, really proud to be of this organization and to be here as well. And again, thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you all for your time. So many people are thanking you in the comments for leading this discussion. Carlene said, thank you, HR, Christina, LaDonna, Mike, and Grant, and Danny for participating in this sensitive and much needed discussion. They're also thanking you guys for the book recommendations and all the resources that you mentioned. So again, thank you all for your time today. Thank you to everybody who took the time to tune in. you know, we're all hopeful, as Mike said. We're hoping for hope over here and healing. And you taking the time to be a part of this conversation and just even listen to this conversation is a positive step forward. So we truly, truly appreciate it. So thank you all. I hope you have a great week. Very different topic next week for Member Focus Monday. We are going to be welcoming ABC 13's Chief Meteorologist Travis Herzog. He's going to be talking to us about hurricane preparation. A lot of helpful tips that are going to be coming from him, what to expect this hurricane season. So be sure to tune in. I would encourage your clients and customers to tune in for that one as well, because everybody wants to know about that. So again, very different topic. I saw somebody said it was their first time watching, but that's how we do it here on Member Focus Monday. We switch topics every week. So again, thank you all for your time today. Thank you to all of our members for joining this conversation. I hope everyone has a great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.